So healthy soils, healthy markets, and thanks, like I said again, thanks so much for the invitation. Um, Wanted to talk just a little bit about, and thanks for the invitation. What I've, folks may have heard of impact investing. They may have heard of ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance investing. You may have heard of their environmental finance, conservation finance. So these combinations where how investment goals and environmental or social goals can kind of come together. And we really, and it's interesting sitting back today and listening, what the frame that we're really trying to get people who have assets, and we all investment assets or otherwise, to try to really understand that their investments have impact, both positive and negative. An earlier stage of this kind of work maybe would talk about, oh, I'm going to divest out of tobacco, or I'm going to divest out of fossil fuels, and leave it at that. But what we're trying to do is that you're really trying to use your money to kind of drive positive environmental or social change. And in order to do that, you really have to have an intention, you have to have measurement, and you may want to also be, or is something that you're doing also changing this? The work that you're doing, is it also going to make a change in the world? So as Ryan mentioned, I've just finished this Impact Investing Handbook. I can post it can be downloaded free on the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors. It's really focused on folks who are trying to align their investment assets with their environmental and social objectives. So just to give you, I think I wanted to link back into some of the things earlier, looking at the history of this, and what we really see is that there are environmental movements and social movements that then get picked up and move into the realm of either public policy, and ultimately they can be addressed through the markets. Not everything can be addressed through the markets. I'm not here like as a neoliberal, markets will solve all problems. But I think it is interesting in some of the examples on here that we'll looking at things like, it was in 1987, the Brundtland Report, where we really first defined the term of sustainability and sustainable development. And then as that movement has evolved, we've been moving into, 2014, the divest from fossil fuels. There was a movement called the divest invest movement out of fossil fuels. And then in 2015, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which include environmental goals as well. But it was a way in which folks around the world, so all stakeholders, but also corporations and investors, could align around sustainable development goals using their investments. One of the concepts that we're trying to develop as we get people to reimagine their assets, and here, we're talking about all kinds of resources, but investment resources, which it's not as normal to think, but to think about your assets in terms of shifting from sort of extraction to regenerative finance. And, a lot of the world of Wall Street thinks about extraction, and how we're trying to reimagine not only how you think about your assets is more like you have a home, and in how you're trying to think about managing your home, rather than just, oh, I'm putting my money into the casino of Wall Street. So a lot of the work, how we frame some of the impact investing approaches that we've looked at, are things like the cleaning up your portfolio. So it's like, are you going to get out of fossil fuels if you hold those in your portfolio? Are you going to divest from certain activities? Then you may be looking at how the renovation, how can in your investment portfolio, how can you invest in environmentally sound companies? How can you, and then also, these are usually, there's a whole world of evaluating public companies according to environmental and social and governance criteria. So how can you do that? And then ultimately sort of this add a room or expand, we're talking about how can you create particular impacts? And with the around the environmental issues and around regeneration, I think there are the words that have been used more in this part of the investment world are things, I think I've heard it today, things like circular economy. How can we invest in the circular economy? There's a frame of this called conservation finance. I know someone was mentioning like land trust and pieces like things like that, and then looking at the economics of environmental ecosystem services and how to have economic value attached to things such as, like Paige was talking about, how do you connect ecosystems and what is the economic attachment to that. So there are a large part of the impact investment world is focused on the environment. There is work around conservation finance. There's a lot of work in impact investing around climate finance. I usually work with foundations or families who have an endowment, or they have their family resources, and they are trying to align all of their investments in a way in which they can help address climate, for example. So I think what's interesting hearing today, a lot of the how we all at the end of the day are going, the financial system and the capital system cannot really live sort of separate from the natural system. And I'm sure everyone on, she hears, that's not controversial to say that here. But I think, how do we kind of start to tie the capital market system and the investment system with the natural systems that the earth needs to live from, and which folks have been talking about today so in such an interesting way. So before I close and before we get to go to questions, I just wanted to pull out just some examples of things that I thought some of you may already know, but of items in which sort of very concrete examples of how folks are investing and looking at soil and regenerative agriculture as investment opportunities. So this is kind of a mishmash. I think some of you may know, maybe not, it's sort of modeled after the slow food movement, but it's called the slow money movement, which is really trying to link the way in which people deploy capital with the principles of environmental regeneration. It comes out, there's slow money groups around the US. I think there may be some internationally, where there really are people who are trying to invest in sustainable food systems locally. The one in the middle, the Main Harvest Federal Credit Union. So sometimes these types of that's been set up as a normal credit union, but they're focused on, they make loans to farmers who use sustainable agriculture, organic farmers. They make loans to folks who are trying to run regenerative agriculture purposes. So that's at a regional, a colleague of mine has launched that and is taking place. Another example of this is the Farmland LP. It's more very much a kind of market-driven investment vehicle, where they basically will buy agricultural land, and then they will convert it into certified organic practices and then sell it out into the market. So this, it mirrors a lot of the same structures that you see in some of the very mainstream agricultural investment vehicles, which are clearly not going to be lined up with some of the pieces. And the next is just, there's a lot of community development and blended philanthropic capital that are investing in how do you sort of battle food deserts. We have local harvest, which, examples of community supported agriculture, which is an investment model in which the end consumers, support the farmer directly. And then finally, Triodos, they're an international. So this is at the global level of working they're a Dutch bank who focuses on environmental and social investing as well. So hopefully it's kind of somewhat of a shift from some of the previous conversations today, but wanted to kind of introduce the concept of how regenerative finance and regenerative soils are not at odds with each other. So I will pause there and hand it back to Ryan.